stepdaughters said I had no right to make any decisions in this house. I cleared their luggage out of the room I paid for, cut off money for transportation, and refused to cover their trip. Their mother never gave them any support. Subscribe and leave your story in the comments. Time to jump right in. You're not our dad. We'll only listen to mom. The words didn't come in a heated argument or some moment of temporary rage. No, they were spoken with calm precision, as though rehearsed, as though she had been waiting for the perfect time to slice me open. Madison stood in the middle of my living room, her posture relaxed, her eyes hard. There was no hesitation, no fear. Chloe sat next to her on the couch, her lips curling into a half-smile, as if the declaration pleased her, as if she found entertainment in my silence. That moment carved itself into me. It was not just rejection, it was erasure. I had no answer for them then. I told myself it was teenage defiance, something that would pass. Adolescence has always been cruel, and I thought I could endure cruelty if it meant building something lasting. But even now, I know the truth. It was the opening *T in a war I didn't even realize had already *N. My name is Daniel. I am 44 years old, and for the last 3 years, I have been married to Sarah. She was supposed to be my second chance at a real family. She came with 2 daughters from her first marriage. Madison, 15, sharp as broken glass, and Chloe, 13, quieter but always in her sister's shadow, echoing every word with a smirk. Their father, Andrew, lingered just out of sight, the ghost of every weekend. He appeared when it suited him, arms crossed, never contributing a cent, but still possessing a kind of natural authority over his daughters that I could never touch, no matter how much I gave. When I married Sarah, I brought my children too. Oliver, 9 years old, still gentle enough to cry openly when hurt, and Lily, 7, fragile, sweet, her small body curling into me on nights when she had nightmares. They were my reason for everything. The long hours at work, the sacrifices, the money I poured into a home that wasn't even half mine anymore. I thought if I gave enough, if I showed enough patience, I could forge us into a single family. So I gave. God, I gave until it hollowed me out. I covered every expense that came through the door. School trips. New clothes when Madison decided her old ones were no longer fashionable. Chloe's extracurriculars. The extra rent on a bigger house, just so the girls wouldn't feel cramped or slighted. I drove them to practices, to friends' houses, to malls, acting like a chauffeur with no complaint. I thought that if I treated them as my own, they would one day see me as something more than a man who happened to marry their mother. I hosted family game nights. I cooked meals for all of us and made sure everyone had a voice at the table. I asked Madison what rules she thought were fair, asked Chloe what she wanted for dinner, as though showing respect would earn me respect in return. I believed love could be coaxed out of hostility, that if I kept proving myself, one day they would let me belong. But generosity, when met with contempt, does not breed loyalty. It breeds scorn. 6 months into our marriage, Madison stood in my living room and cut me down with her words. "You're not our dad. We'll only listen to mom." She didn't flinch when she said it. She didn't soften it with a laugh. It was fact, as far as she was concerned. Chloe's smirk was the confirmation. Agreement without a single word. I swallowed it that day. I told myself not to overreact. Teenagers test boundaries, I thought. They lash out at figures of authority, especially new ones. This would pass. But it didn't pass. Calcified. Every attempt I made to connect was met with silence or mockery. Every instruction I gave was ignored until Sarah repeated it, as if my voice had no weight unless filtered through her. At first, I thought it was harmless. But slowly, it became a ritual, a humiliating dance that played out in front of my own children. And they noticed. Oliver, who once ran into the kitchen eager to tell me about his day, grew quiet when Madison was around. Lily, who once clung to my side with joy, began to look at the floor when her stepsisters mocked her. My children were learning that in this house, their father's voice didn't matter. That respect was selective, that cruelty carried more authority than care. That was the poison that spread under my roof. Still, I endured. I told myself patience would win. I told myself kindness over time could break through walls. I believed Sarah would stand beside me, would demand her daughters treat me with the same respect she gave me. But Sarah stayed silent. She excused their behavior, called it adjustment, said they were just protecting their bond with their father. Protecting their bond? I was the one paying for everything. I was the one driving them, feeding them, covering for the gaps Andrew left every time he vanished. What bond was being protected except one that was already stronger than anything I could build? And so I remained on the outside, a man present in body, erased in spirit. The house became a battlefield fought in silences and smirks. My children were caught in the crossfire, and I, despite all my efforts, became the enemy. There is a moment in every man's life where he realizes patience is not virtue. It is weakness in the wrong company. I hadn't reached that moment yet, but it was coming. I could feel it in the way my hands clenched when Madison dismissed me. I could feel it in the way my chest tightened when Chloe laughed at my instructions. I could feel it every time Sarah's silence told me I was on my own. And it all began that day with Madison's words, a declaration that I was nothing. Nothing in my own home. They didn't stop after that first declaration. Why would they? No one corrected them. No one forced them to acknowledge me. Sarah stayed quiet, too afraid to upset her daughters. Andrew, their father, kept his distance, slipping in on weekends with casual authority, never lifting a finger, never opening his wallet, but leaving behind his invisible seal of approval. He's not your dad, don't listen to him. So Madison and Chloe made the rules. Every request I made was treated like background noise. If I told them to clean up, they ignored me until Sarah repeated the exact same words. If I asked them to lower their voices when Lily was trying to sleep, they laughed, turned up their music and said, "Mom doesn't care, so why should we?" Their disregard wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was quieter, sharper, the steady drip of contempt. At first, I tried to rise above it. I thought silence would show strength. I thought if I didn't engage, they'd eventually soften. But silence, in their eyes, was weakness. They learned they could ignore me without consequence. And once children learn that lesson, they never unlearn it. It wasn't only me they targeted. They turned their cruelty toward Oliver and Lily too. That was when the contempt crossed from insult into violence. I'll never forget the night Lily came to me, her face streaked with tears, clutching the straps of her empty school bag. She sobbed so hard she could barely breathe. "Madison took it," she whispered. She said, "You don't get to decide anything here." The words cut deeper than Madison's original rejection. It was one thing to humiliate me. It was another to *p*nize that contempt against my 7-year-old daughter. The next day, Oliver came running to me, his small fists shaking, holding the broken pieces of his toy train. He could hardly speak through his tears. She threw it," he stammered. I didn't need to ask who. Chloe stood in the hallway, arms crossed, smirking. "Ask your daddy to buy you a new one," she sneered. "That's all he's good for. All I'm good for." That was the truth as they saw it. Not a father. Not a man worthy of respect. Just a wallet with legs. I wanted to scream. I wanted to drag Madison and Chloe into the room, force them to face the damage they were inflicting. But I didn't. I swallowed it like I had swallowed every slight before. I tucked my children into bed, whispered promises I wasn't sure I could keep. "I'll protect you. I'll make it better." And then I sat alone in the dark. That night I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling until the dawn pressed pale light through the blinds. And then I went downstairs, pulled a notebook from the drawer, and began to write. Line by line, I listed everything I had paid for since we'd moved into this house. Madison's bus pass, Chloe's uniforms, their extracurricular fees, the summer trip I had booked so they could all experience something special together, the larger house we rented, the extra room I had sacrificed just so Madison and Chloe wouldn't feel overlooked, the school lunches, the outings, the rides, the endless costs that came without gratitude. Page after page, I filled the notebook. Each line was a confession, a record of my labor. By the time I finished, my hands were shaking. Not with exhaustion, but with clarity. I realized something that should have been obvious from the start. They were right. I wasn't their father. And if I wasn't their father, I didn't owe them anything. That realization didn't come with anger. It came with a cold calm, the kind that seeps into your bones when you finally stop lying to yourself. I had been pretending for too long that patience would heal this family. But patience had only built a prison, one where my children were forced to live under mockery and disrespect. The breaking point wasn't the words. It wasn't even the broken toy. It was the look in Lily's eyes as she told me what Madison had said. The shame, the confusion, the dawning realization that in this house, her father's authority meant nothing. That night, something hardened inside me. I promised myself I would never let my children see me as powerless again. I put the notebook away, but I didn't need to look at it to remember. Every number was already burned into me. Every sacrifice, every silent compromise, every dollar spent to buy myself a place in a family that never wanted me. The next morning, I looked at Madison and Chloe as they laughed over breakfast. Their smirks sharpened by the knowledge that I couldn't touch them. They believed I was trapped. They believed I would keep paying, keep driving, keep feeding, keep funding their lives no matter how they treated me. But they were wrong. They thought cruelty came without consequence. They were about to learn otherwise. The morning after my list was written, I no longer felt like a man cornered. I felt like a man preparing to reclaim what was his. I waited until the house was empty. Sarah at work, Madison and Chloe at school, Oliver and Lily tucked into their classrooms. Then I walked upstairs, opened the door to the larger room I had rented so Sarah's daughters could each have space, and I started packing. Their posters came down from the walls, their clothes folded into suitcases, their trinkets gathered into boxes. Piece by piece, I dismantled the illusion I had built for them. When I was done, I shut the door behind me and turned the key. That room no longer belonged to them. It belonged to my children. That afternoon, when they came home, Madison stormed up the stairs. Minutes later, her voice thundered down the hallway. "Where are my things?" Chloe's cry followed, higher-pitched, sharp with disbelief. I met them on the landing, my voice steady, deliberate. "I moved you both out of that room. Oliver and Lily will use it now. They deserve the space. You'll share the smaller room." Madison's face flushed with rage. "You can't just do that." I didn't raise my voice. "You said I wasn't your father. You made it clear I had no authority here. If that's true, then I have no obligation to give you anything. That room, those trips, the money I spend, they're not yours anymore." Chloe gasped, tears already forming. Madison opened her mouth to shout again, but Sarah's footsteps echoed behind me. She had come home early. Her eyes darted from me to her daughters, confusion flashing into anger. "Daniel, what is going on?" I turned to her, still calm. "I'm done pretending. I've paid for their lives, the room, the trips, the transport, the endless extras. And in return, I've been told I'm nothing. If I'm nothing, then they can live without my money." Her jaw tightened. She looked at Madison, at Chloe, then back at me. For the first time, she didn't have a defense ready. The silence between us was thick, unbearable. Then Madison spoke again, her voice trembling with fury. "You can't just stop paying. We need those things." I looked her straight in the eye. "Need? No. You want them. And I've decided I'm done giving what I'm not respected for." The next blow came quietly but decisively. I canceled the summer trip. I called the office, spoke to the travel agent, and withdrew the payments. Gone. The girls had been bragging about it for weeks, talking about beaches and photos and what they would post online. They never expected it would vanish because the man funding it decided his dignity was worth more than their amusement. Then I cut off the smaller streams. No more cash for transportation. No more money for lunches outside of what Sarah herself provided. No more extras slipped into their hands while they rolled their eyes. I froze every indulgence they had grown used to, one by one, until all that remained was what their mother alone could cover. The reaction was volcanic. Sarah confronted me that evening in the kitchen. "You're punishing children," she hissed, her voice breaking. "This isn't the way." I set down my fork, leaned back in my chair, and met her gaze without flinching. No, I'm teaching them. Respect is not optional. If they want to treat me like I'm nothing, then they'll see what nothing really looks like. I won't bankroll my own humiliation. She pressed her lips together, trembling, torn between her daughters and her husband. She didn't speak again. For days the house was filled with storms. Madison slammed doors. Chloe cried into pillows. They whispered to each other in their room, plotting words sharp enough to pierce me, but I didn't rise to the bait. Every tantrum was met with silence. Every scream was answered with stillness. Then something strange happened. The house grew quiet. Oliver and Lily, freed from the constant mockery, began to breathe easier. Lily sang to herself again, something she hadn't done in months. Oliver pulled out his Legos and built cities across the living room floor, no longer afraid they'd be destroyed. The air was lighter, calmer, as if cutting off the poison had purified our home. And then came the moment I hadn't expected. Andrew showed up. He pulled into the driveway in his rusted car, the kind of vehicle that coughed with age. Madison and Chloe lit up when they saw him, running to greet him like he was a savior. He stood in the doorway, his arms crossed, his eyes on me. "What's this I hear about you cutting them off?" I didn't move from where I stood. They told me I wasn't their father, so I stopped acting like one. His mouth twisted, as if he wanted to argue, but he couldn't. He knew the truth. He had abandoned his responsibilities years ago. Everything his daughters had enjoyed I had given. He could challenge my decision, but he couldn't deny my role. He muttered something to Sarah, too quiet for me to hear, then gestured for the girls. They grabbed their bags and followed him, shooting me looks of triumph, as though they had won by leaving. The door closed, silence fell, and for the first time in months, my house was peaceful. That night, I tucked Oliver and Lily into bed. They slept without fear, without tears. I sat in the darkened living room, listening to the absence of slammed doors, the absence of contempt, the absence of venom. And I realized something profound. I hadn't lost anything. I had gained freedom. Weeks passed in silence. At first, I thought the calm would shatter quickly, that Madison and Chloe would come storming back, full of fresh insults, that Sarah would press me harder, that Andrew would demand I reconsider. But the days rolled forward, quiet, measured, almost serene. Oliver and Lily thrived in that silence. Lily slept soundly without waking from nightmares. Oliver laughed again, unafraid to play with his toys without the threat of Chloe's mockery. My children had space to breathe. For the first time since our marriage, my house felt like it belonged to me again. But absence doesn't last forever. One evening, just as the sun dipped below the horizon, there was a knock at the door. Slow, hesitant. When I opened it, Madison stood there with Chloe half hidden behind her. No smirks, no defiance. Their eyes were downcast, their voices small. "Can we come in?" Madison asked. I stepped aside, silent. They shuffled in, their bodies tense, their arrogance stripped away. Chloe clutched the strap of her bag, her shoulders hunched like a child much younger than 13. Madison cleared her throat, then forced the words out. "We're sorry," she said. The same girl who once looked me in the eye and declared I was nothing could barely meet my gaze now. "We were wrong. We shouldn't have said what we said." Her words hung in the air, fragile, desperate. Sarah, who had been sitting in the living room, looked at me with pleading eyes. Hope flickered across her face, the hope that this nightmare might finally end. I let the silence stretch until it became unbearable. Then I spoke. My voice was calm, but it carried the weight of every wound they had inflicted. "Do you understand what your words cost?" I asked. "Do you understand what you taught my children when you mocked me, when you told them their father had no authority in his own house? Do you understand the damage you've done?" Madison swallowed hard. Chloe whispered, "We didn't mean it." But they had. Of course they had. Words spoken with such clarity, repeated so many times, are not accidents. They are truths children believe until reality proves them wrong. I shook my head. You told me I wasn't your father, and I believed you. That is why I stopped paying. That is why I stopped pretending. If I am nothing to you, then you can expect nothing from me." Chloe's eyes filled with tears. Madison's face tightened, her pride warring with her desperation. "We said we're sorry," she muttered. "What else do you want from us?" "Respect. That's what I wanted. Not apologies born of necessity. Not words dragged out because Andrew couldn't provide what they needed. I wanted respect that lived in the everyday, in the way they spoke to me, in the way they listened when I asked something, in the way they treated my children. And I knew, deep down, that respect couldn't be begged into existence. It had to be chosen. So I told them the truth. Sorry isn't enough. You'll show me respect, or you'll get nothing from me. There is no middle ground anymore." Sarah gasped softly, as though my words were a sentence too harsh to bear. But I didn't flinch. Madison looked at me with wide eyes, her face pale. Chloe whispered something I couldn't hear. They turned, defeated, and walked back toward the door. Madison paused, as though waiting for me to soften, waiting for me to take it all back, to chase after them with open arms. I didn't move. When the door closed, the silence was absolute. Later that night, Sarah confronted me. "They're just children," she said, her voice breaking. "They don't understand the weight of what they've said." I looked at her, exhausted, but steady. "Then maybe this is how they'll learn. Maybe they'll finally understand that words have consequences. Because if they can't respect me, then I won't raise my children in a house where I am treated as nothing." Her tears fell freely, but she didn't argue again. Deep down, she knew I was right. In the weeks that followed, Madison and Chloe hovered on the edge of our lives. Sometimes they came back with softer voices, trying to patch what they had broken. Sometimes they stayed away, leaving Sarah torn between loyalty to me and guilt for her daughters. Andrew never stepped up, of course he didn't. The burden of their lives, once carried on my back, now fell into emptiness. And that emptiness became the lesson. Oliver and Lily learned something too. They saw their father stand his ground. They saw that kindness without respect is not love but slavery. They saw that boundaries protect, that silence in the face of cruelty is no virtue. And me? I learned the hardest truth of all. You cannot buy respect. You cannot purchase love with money, patience, or sacrifice. You cannot build a family on one person's back. It must be mutual or it will rot from within. Now I sit here, writing this, remembering the day Madison told me I wasn't her father. Remembering Chloe sneering that all I was good for was money. Remembering the tears of my daughter, the broken toy of my son, the silence of my wife. I did not explode. I did not scream. I acted. I cut the cords that had bound me to their contempt. And though they came back later with apologies, the truth was already carved into stone. Respect, once broken, cannot be restored by words alone. So I ask you, was I cruel? Was I heartless to pull back everything I had given? Or was I simply honest, refusing to live as a ghost in my own house, refusing to let my children believe their father was powerless? Because in the end, the lesson stands, respect must be mutual. Without it, there is no family, only strangers sharing a roof.